If you were providing advice to another company and they were looking at starting a corporate venture studio, what would be your piece of advice that you would give that corporate?
I want to break down a few areas I think are important. Number one, have a very clear mandate. In everything that's changed within 1848 Ventures, the mandate has stayed consistent since the beginning of 1848 Ventures. So to me, the mandate's really important. I think that's clear. I think experimentation is also key. You're not going to get it right the first time around. So have the flexibility, have the ability to experiment. Again, learn from those experiments quickly and adapt. I think that's an important part of the journey that we're on. Always be shipping, right? I mean, it's easy to say, but like at these early stages, I don't care if you're building your own individual startup or you're within a venture studio model, you have to ship product. The more you ship, the more you will learn. The more you will learn, the better you will build companies. Last thing I would also say is that AI is fundamentally reshaping how businesses are built, right? So within the venture studio model, we are in a prime position to capitalize on that. So don't be afraid of what's coming. Embrace it. It may be messy. It may be challenging. It may be a whole new unknown, but embrace the change. And as the more you embrace it, I think the better the outcomes will be for you and your venture studio.
Kal, thank you for being here. We're thrilled to have you talk to us about 1848 Ventures and venture studios in general. I know you and I met a few months ago, and you had just joined 1848 as managing director. Now, Marcus and I were familiar with 1848 Ventures before because we had actually been working with the group on a couple of different ventures and operating models and different systems. And I have to say that 1848 Ventures is a fascinating venture studio. I really sort of was blown away at the time with the model and remain, super fascinated by it, which I know we're going to get into. But for one, you guys are backed by Westfield Insurance, which is a large insurance company, but you don't actually have a mandate to build insurance-related products. So I think the strategy behind that is super interesting. But you are specialized in a way. So you're doing B2B. Small business, building businesses for small business entities, leveraging AI in specific verticals, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. And I will say this: like whenever people ask me what venture studios are out there that are interesting, doing cool things, I actually always genuinely say 1848 Ventures because you're shipping companies, which sounds like it should be obvious because that's the job of a venture studio, but it's not that easy to do. And you guys are actually doing it. So with that, I'd like to dig in right away. And first, I mean, you've only been there for 8-9 months. So what convinced you to join 1848 Ventures as managing director?
Yeah, that's great. Well, first and foremost, great to see you both again, Ben and Marcus. Look, so I've actually been here for about 7 months, so still relatively early in the journey. And you're right, there's a lot of uniqueness to what we do at 1848 Ventures, and I'm happy to dig into that today. But what really drove me here, so kind of happened, I wouldn't say by like chance, I'll call it serendipity. One of my investors in my previous startup, was in the podcasting and audio space. Was an advisor to 1848 Ventures. And as I was exiting my previous startup after acquisition, he had reached out and said, "Hey, look, I think there's an opportunity here where I think a lot of what you've done in your career, I've been in the technology space for about 25 years, worked in some of the early stage companies, which turned out to be really large companies. Happy to dig into that as you'd like. But really, it's a great blend of my experience operating, growing, and scaling companies with venture capital. And within this venture studio model, it gives me a chance to really kind of flex a lot of what I've done over the course of my 25 years. But also, it's a learning journey as well. The opportunity to really learn about venture, learn about a venture studio model, and where I can apply a lot of what I've done and really bring that into the fold with what the team has done over the last 6 years.
Yeah, and Cal, I'll just add, Ben and I would look at you being the triple threat. Like you mentioned, you had this great experience, in corporate sides already with Google, Spotify. You've done your own startup before, but I wouldn't underestimate the power of the investor lens as well, which you brought, and you've been an active investor in the ecosystem for a long time. Out of those three elements, what do you think so far in the first 7 months has really been additive to your new role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think where we've spent the last 7 months, and we just actually came off of an offsite not too long ago, at the beginning of the year. It's really been about like reimagining what 1848 Ventures can do as a venture studio, right? And over the course of the first 6 years of the studio, we've launched three ventures. We're going to launch three this year, right? So we're going to double up in 2025 what we've done over the first 6 years of the studio. And I kind of see it as an evolution, right? The team has spent in the early days establishing the venture studio model, really focusing on research, identifying the thesis, and really kind of curating what is now, we believe, the right opportunity for 1848 Ventures. And I think, as Ben already alluded to, we are focused on really that small to medium sized business market where we are building AI powered solutions that support the growth of what we believe to be a really important part of the US economy. 44% of US GDP, 70% of job creation. And not only is it really supporting the economy, it's also a really important part of the communities that these SMBs serve. So we think it's really important to really kind of create a clear understanding of where we're going after. And what I've been able to do is really help support, like really like reimagining the operations in the first 7 months. So this idea of moving with velocity and speed and launching high quality ventures that can scale independently is where we've spent most of our time.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Look, Cal, let me ask you this, on the point of focusing on small business as a market and Westfield being an insurance company. And I know you've only been there for 7 months, so you weren't there when this venture studio was created to start with. But how does this fit in strategically with everything that Westfield is doing or may be doing? How do you, at the end of the day, what does winning look like for the studio and Westfield on a whole?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, look, I think I'll start off by saying that the Westfield team has been nothing but supportive of the journey. Throughout I think the first 6 years, but also including the last 7 months that I've been here, we've fully been empowered to really drive decisioning for the types of startups or ventures that we launch. There is no real decision making in terms of the types of ventures that we launch within the Westfield organization. That really sits with us. We do have, what I'll call like a board that we work with when it comes to investment, when it comes to funding. And we do obviously a quarterly kind of review of everything that the 1848 team is up to. I think there's two components to this. Number one, there is a strong focus on small to medium sized businesses within Westfield, and there's a strong focus on small to medium sized businesses at 1848. Our number one priority at 1848 is to launch startups or ventures that support the small to medium sized business community that can be independent, can be profitable, and scalable. And if we do that again at scale, what that does is it provides another extension of customer conversations with the Westfield team. If you think about Westfield and insurance in general, it's really this transfer of risk. And how do we help create a deeper relationship with small to medium sized customers across both our relationships as well as with the Westfield relationship?
Could you double click a little bit on the venture board, or just how big is that board? How are decisions made?
Yeah, it's relatively small. And for those who've had boards, small boards are better than big boards, in my opinion. Things move a little bit faster. The board is made up of really, and I call it a board. It's really like an advisory group or a committee. We meet with that team on a quarterly basis at a minimum, where we review the progress of 1848 Ventures, where we see opportunity, really kind of outlining our strategy and the direction we're taking with the organization. And I think that's been it's been a really healthy relationship. Been very supportive, and I think we've been really able to create a mechanism where we can make decisions pretty quickly.
And I know we work with a number of companies that, of course, have venture studios, but also other things. So they're doing internal innovation, for example, and some of that might be, incremental, of course, but some of it might be a little bit further out that could intercept or bump into the studio model. A number of the companies we work with have CVCs, corporate venture capital groups.
Yeah.
So, for Westfield or for 1848, how do you think about? I think of it like other tools in the toolbox. You could build stuff, which is what you guys are doing today. You could buy stuff. You could partner with startups. You could spin things out. So, how do you think about the tools in the toolbox around the other things you could be doing that could be maybe competitive to a studio model or accretive?
Well, I think it all starts with what I've said to the team in the the short time that I've been here is that we need to be successful with our core. And our core at the moment is really launching ventures through the studio model. Again, why we're really betting on this idea of velocity, creating quality ventures, is that it allows us to then open up the aperture potentially maybe later this year or in the future, where we are thinking about, potentially even looking at investment into other, startups, looking at entrepreneurs and bringing them to really, focus on their ideas. But it all starts with our core model, which is the venture studio model. We've invested a lot of time, energy, and resource to build out this team. And we have, over the course of 6 years, done a tremendous amount of research. We have a real strong focus on key verticals within the small to medium sized business community. And with that success, we do believe that there's a larger opportunity, right? But ultimately, it has to tie back to our mandate. And that mandate is focused on small to medium sized businesses, which I consider to be not only an opportunity, but an obligation given where the market is today. But also, again, back to AI powered solutions that can really help us deepen those relationships with customers, both within 1848 as well as with Westfield.
You've done a great job in acquiring and I think retaining talent. I'm curious a bit about the blend between external and internal talent. What's your viewpoint being in 7 months in and just looking at that as a priority as well?
Yeah, I hope it's okay to curse on this call, but we have a kick-ass team. So,
Oh, that's not actually. We never established whether it's okay to curse or not. But go ahead. And I don't even consider that cursing, by the way. Like,
Yeah, that's
I'd love to hear you say something much more
I don't know if
interesting
this
than
is like an
kick-ass.
NC-17 podcast or video cast or it's PG-13, but
it's corporate cursing.
I like it.
Corporate
Yes.
cursing is allowed.
That our team is a kick-ass team. And, we just came, as I mentioned, we just had our kickoff offsite in January down in Charleston, South Carolina, where we reestablished, who we are, what we do, where we focus, down to the brand that we've now, we've rebranded 1848 Ventures as well.
I saw that.
Yeah. And I think the team is very engaged. We've brought a set of operating principles where we are operating with what I call urgency with purpose. The only real, constant is change. It's really learning by doing. And the team really represents all those values. And, we're asking one more question. We're making sure we understand why we're going after a specific customer segment or a vertical. We're building products and services that we believe can really scale for those customers that we serve. So we've done a good job of really not only retaining strong talent, but over the course of the last 7 months also have, supported or complemented that talent or that team with new individuals who have joined as well. So it's been a combination of both. And I think that's healthy, right? Like having folks who have been here for a while, have the institutional knowledge, the experience can help us really navigate what's been built, but also bringing in new experiences that allow us to grow and upskill what we're trying to do across the organization.
And where in your process, Cal, because again, I use the word operating model, and you guys have a methodology for validating stuff. And you've already said a couple of times, spent a lot of time on research, now trying to move into this execution phase, 3 companies this year, which is significantly more than in the past, which is amazing. When in the process do you look to bring in the operator for an actual business? So, we could spend hours just going through the whole methodology. But as you're validating something, when do you make that decision of, okay, this is a go, we're going to go build this business, and when do you bring in that CEO, founder, operator to take it over and have their own team to execute?
Yeah, it's again a great question. And here's what I would say: it's like it's all about experimentation, and we're not really rigid in that approach. I think historically there's been a model of get it to a certain stage and then bring on that leader. We've also seen within our organization where, for one of our ventures, Take Up AI, which is in the travel and hospitality space, part of the incubation team, or what we call our innovation engine, individuals from that team moved into the venture itself, and we've seen a lot of success there. So we actually look at it on a case-by-case basis at this point. If there's an opportunity where we have a strong leader who we believe can kind of, come out of the innovation engine and go run the studio or run the startup, we will bring them into that startup. But we're looking earlier and earlier, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it.
And my belief is, I had an observation which we're now kind of taking action against when I first arrived. And I think there's this pitfall of like product and engineering versus like industry expertise and go to market. I'm a big believer that industry expertise and go to market is probably more important at this stage than finding the best product person. Dare I say, given the world we live in now, that product and engineering in some cases can be a commodity, right? We are certainly looking for the best engineers. We're still looking for the best product people, and we have many of them in our organization. So I'm not discrediting any of them, just to be clear, but we do believe that finding that leader who has an industry understanding, can cut through the red tape, understands the underlying dynamics of the specific vertical, and then understands how to really build a go-to-market strategy is critical. And the earlier you can do that, the better it will be for the venture, is our belief.
Right. Yeah, I like that a lot. I was just going to say, I've always been a proponent of bring the operator, founder, CEO, whatever you want to call that person, bring them in earlier into the journey, not, post MVP. Bring them in, help them craft it. They understand the space, and we could debate product a lot, I think, but yeah, at the end of the day,
You have a little bias, Ben, but you can say it.
I do have a little bias, but I was going to say, to me, can we build it is not the real question. Is, can we sell it and scale it is really the biggest unknown. And I think a lot of studios I see get caught maybe in the whole process of validation and research and that whole methodology. They try to systematize it to a point where it gets, I'm just following tasks on a task list. And it sounds to me, Cal, like you got in here and said, we got to launch companies, and maybe we can be a little bit more flexible on methodology. Maybe we hire the CEO really early. Maybe it's really late. Maybe we build less. Maybe it sounds to me like you're trying to modify and loosen up the methodology and not getting caught in those weeds.
Yeah, like there's a standard template for how we operate. So there is a process, there is a structure. But I'm a big believer in like learning by doing, right? And I think you can sit in a room and do research all day. You can do jobs to be done type of work, till you're blue in the face. Unless you're in market with an MVP, talking to a customer, understanding their needs, I'm not sure if you're going to be successful. So yes, we do have a process. Credit again to the innovation engine team. We have refined that process even further, where we are getting the ideas faster, right? Getting through prototyping and validation faster, and looking at opportunities to bring, these ventures into market that much quicker. So it is definitely a structured process. So it is repeatable, it is scalable, and it's something that every single individual within the team can use, but it doesn't have to be rigid. It has to be flexible enough based on what we learn, how quickly we want to pivot, and what decisions we want to make based on the information we're collecting from customers. So that's another one of our operating principles, or two of them are really around like this idea of learning by doing, and also putting the customer first, right? Which, not that it hasn't been a focus for us, we've kind of doubled down on that over the last 7 months.
Clearly, the operating model is working well if you're scaling up to 3 ventures now. So I think portfolio construction is becoming maybe a bigger piece of your time and what you're thinking about putting on that investor lens. I'd love to learn a bit more of how you're thinking about that, from blending in your past experiences being a startup investor, but also understanding the corporate context.
Yeah. So look, I think a couple things. We will, if doubling the size of the portfolio is no small feat. So that's a really important part of what we want to do. In terms of the mix, I think we still look at, one of the things we say internally is we're not creating solutions to find a problem, right? We are really going deep to understand what problems we can solve, given the team, given the focus and the mandate, as we've talked about, but also what's available to us from a technology standpoint. So as we think about the portfolio for this year, it's a combination of multiple industries. I also think that in addition to like vertical focus, that horizontal opportunities are starting to present themselves. So cutting across multiple industries. And when we think about small to medium sized businesses, one of the areas that I'm really focused on is this understanding of the profile of that SMB owner, right? And when we look at the SMB owner, what we've learned and some of the insights we've picked up over the last 7 months is that in addition to, large part of our GDP and job creation, it's an aging population, right? So you're seeing that over 50% of SMB earners are over 55 plus. And we believe that there's a new entrepreneur coming in. There is a younger entrepreneur who is digitally savvy, very AI curious. Some of them are skipping corporate altogether. Others are corporate refugees, as we like to call them. And there's an opportunity here where, well, we can build products and services for these types of entrepreneurs while also supporting the existing owners because they want technology. They want the technology to do the work for them. And we think that we've kind of hit this perfect time where we have an opportunity, again, to create companies that support these entrepreneurs and help them scale up faster, be more productive, be more efficient, and ultimately be more profitable because that's the name of the game when you're talking about these small to medium sized businesses.
Yeah, from our experience, one of the biggest challenges we see getting into kind of year two in portfolio construction is when are you going to have those old other moments where you're really putting down a venture that's beloved to the innovation team, and how does talent get recycled, and it picks up all these other psychological and also real operational challenges within the group itself. So um, we'd love to get a perspective of just how you would approach some of these challenges, because when you're going fast and you're going beyond the core even faster now. So
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've said to the team is like, we do need to make decisions faster, right? And I think in my opinion, a bad decision is better than no decision, given some of the kind of stages we're at. And ultimately, we have created back to our process. One of the things that we've implemented is what we call a scorecard. We have like a scorecard methodology where we like rank against like market size, market opportunity. Is this a product that the customer really wants? Is this a product the customer will actually pay for even if they want it? All the way down, is it actually gaining the market traction? But we have an opportunity here, and I think we have made some decisions along the way where we've killed some things pretty early in that venture loop process. Um, we're also seeing success. So as you think about portfolio construction, one of our ventures, we're excited to see the next stage from seed into Series A, and that we think that's an opportunity in 25. But as new ventures come up, we've made it a core focus that we have a small investment committee within our own organization, even before it gets into the larger board conversation, where if it's not working, we will kill it off. And that's just the reality. We need to move fast. We have a capital envelope that we work in, and we want to make sure we're leveraging those funds for the most important opportunities that we have.
What do you think the funnel looks like, Cal? If you could say 2025, you launched 3 businesses. How many ideas? How many things you test? Again, I know we can't go through the whole journey, but if you had to imagine sort of how many of these things are going to be killed along the way to get to the 3 that you get to market and launch with, which doesn't guarantee success, but at least they're out there and live. What do you think that funnel looks like, percentage wise or stage wise?
I'll tell you, so over the last 7 months, let's say we had about 100 ideas in the initial idea generation bucket. We brought it down to a top 10. And of those 10, we have about 3 that we believe are viable. So that's the model for this year. We're hoping we have even more ideas in the idea bucket at the early stages. But look, our goal here is to, like, as I mentioned, to launch 3 this year, and then consistently launch a minimum of 2 moving forward. So given what I just shared with you, I think like we've found that sweet spot. Um, I'm not sure if we need thousands of ideas just yet, but look, I think with AI and some of the things we can now do with technology, can we do more research? Can we do more validation? Can we do more prototyping that supports the work that our team is already doing to potentially launch more? So we're investigating that. We're looking into it at the moment, and we think that there could be again another viable path to create or complement the venture process that we've created today.
Got it. And you've mentioned the innovation engine and the innovation engine team a couple of times. Can you just share with us how the team is roughly structured? I believe that team is the team that's doing that ideation and that research, taking things to a certain point, and then it goes into, okay, we're going and building this, and that's a different team. Again, you pointed out some folks might be the right fit to move along with it, but just how is the team structured overall?
Yeah. So the composition of that team is there are individuals who focus on research. We've hired a pretty substantial engineering team within that organization over the last 7 months. We have data scientists who sit within that organization. Um, And then we've got, what we call venture leaders, venture builders, venture builder product, venture builder technical. Some of those are the data scientists that I mentioned. And we're looking at like go to market as another opportunity, as I mentioned. So right now it's primarily research, engineering, and these venture builder type roles that we've created.
And that's in the innovation engine team. So those data scientists and engineers, they'd be building prototypes, maybe even MVPs, right? Before
Correct.
and they're
Prototyping.
even testing it in market, right? So they're launching these things in market, testing it first before you say there's a there. Then you would go and formalize a venture team for a specific venture. Is that the handoff?
That's right. Yeah. So that venture builder team plus the engineering team will everything from market research, customer conversations, building out the working with engineering to build out the prototypes, all the way to the MVP. But along the way, we're having customer conversations almost daily at this point. And at some point, when we feel like we've gotten to a stage where this can be a pre-seed venture, it starts to make its way out of the innovation engine as a standalone company.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you're leveraging AI, and you described, and that's a big focus of ventures you're building right now. How do you think that is going to supercharge how you get things through the funnel faster? Like, how you're anticipating that?
It's a great question. So, one of the things that I believe is that no matter how many humans we would hire, we would not be able to process the amount of data, analyze it, synthesize it, as much as AI and like an agentic system could do. So we believe that's one area. Starting with early code for prototyping can be done through agentic systems today. So we think that's another opportunity. There's a lot of open questions around idea generation. We still believe that is the creativity is still like a human element to that.
Agreed.
That's where we really lean in. And then all the way through, like our scorecarding methodology, like we've done it, what I'll call manually today. But how do we actually implement that into a system that allows us to understand the viability, the quality, and potentially even the scalability of a venture through an AI system, right? So it's not about reducing the number of people we have in the organization. It's about how do we potentially double the amount of ventures that we can create based on the fact that we now have technology that can help us, again, be more productive, be more efficient, and automate some of the things that have been historically manual.
Which I think also leads well to how you're also creating more value as an entity, as an organization. Just thinking about how you leverage AI and the enterprise value creation of these new ventures, right? We see in the startup ecosystem, all these AI startups are raising at high valuations and equating things that you're putting through your operating model and launching, what that value is. Does that come up at all at the board level?
It does. And, we back to like solving problems rather than creating complex solutions and finding a problem. Again, it's all about really solving a problem for the small to medium sized business community. Um, and it does come up. We've put an emphasis this year, what I call an AI first strategy, right? So we believe that similar to what we've seen historically, where in the early days of the internet, there was this, unlimited access to information. Then we went through this like mobile first. It was supposed to be the year of mobile, but ended up being like the decade of mobile. There was like cloud first, and now we're in this AI first kind of era. And we think this is going to be very transformative, right? It is going to be a very different way of working. And the thing that we also like to say in turn is like, it's not that AI is going to take your job. It's those folks who know how to use AI, they will be the ones who will be successful in this next generation. So that is where we were leaning in. And we think that allows us, again, not only to build new processes within the venture studio, but also as we're building companies to support small to medium sized businesses, it's really important to, what we call eating our own dog food, right? So understanding the technology, being able to understand how it can be harnessed by these small to medium sized businesses. How do we make it easy, intuitive to use, but also easy to implement? So that is a big focus for us. It's still early days for all of us. So we're all learning along the way. And what we know today is going to be very different even, a month from now, let alone like the rest of 2025.
Yeah, totally. It creates a pathway to co-create with some of these SMBs on the outside too, which I think also is a logical evolution as you get more beyond the core.
It's changing so fast. I mean, I've been playing with Lovable. I don't know if you've tried it, lovable.dev. And I've been using another tool called Relevance AI. These are not promos for these organizations. It's just tools I'm using. Relevance AI for building agents. It's pretty scrappy still. It's pretty scrappy. And idea generation, I'm with you. I think AI for idea generation is we've tried it. We're trying it. We're using it at Highline Beta. It's okay. I think for automating scorecards, that's an interesting one. I hadn't really thought about that because we implement and work with scorecards with a whole bunch of partners. That's sort of an interesting one of, can you pull a bunch of data together as we think about stage gates through a process and automate some of that? Maybe take out some of the human element, which is, well, I worked for 6 months on this venture, so I'm going to put my vote in for this one versus the one Marcus worked on. That sort of thing is interesting. When you mentioned pre-seed and scorecard, so you sort of said when a venture gets out of the innovation engine, you think of it as the pre-seed level. So what has to be absolutely true with that scorecard for you to say, because again, we could debate, maybe we agree, I don't know, but even what pre-seed is, if you think about it as an investor, but what has to be absolutely true for you at that place to be like, let's go and move this to that, it's at a pre-seed stage?
Yeah. Look, again, great question. We are trying again to be a little bit more flexible here, so we're not being rigid. I mean, there's obviously a scoring component to the scorecard. That's why it's called a scorecard. But again, understanding again the product market fit. Is there a set of initial customers that have signed on for the product? We've actually increased that number from where we were historically. So I think we need more customers than less customers.
You set a higher bar.
That's right. Definitely setting a higher bar.
Why not? Yeah.
For us, I think, look, we look at both like, direct product growth or direct sales growth versus like product-led growth. I'm a big believer in product-led growth. So is there a product-led growth opportunity for the type of venture that we're building? Does it solve a customer's pain point? That is like, I think the core of it. And can we find the customers who will want to pay for that product? You'll talk to hundreds or thousands of customers, and yes, many people will have a specific pain point, but unless they're truly willing to pay for it, it could be a great product. If we can't really grow a business, then it's probably not something we would invest in.
Right. And you would use paying at that stage as the indicator of value. To me, this part is always so fascinating. Like, is it solving a real problem? And it's like, they tell me it is. So is paying the key for you to say, look, they're paying for it? That tells me
It's always fuzzy.
Yeah, it's fuzzy. One of the things that I said when I first got to 1848 Ventures and shared with the team is that not only are we going to focus on building quality ventures, they have to be revenue generating and they have to be profitable. And I think in the world we live in today, I think revenue is critical and customers are critical early on. Can we continue to pivot from the initial product idea? Sure. But I think understanding if there are a set of customers who are willing to pay for a product, I think is a pretty important, stat, right? In other words, we're not building consumer products, right? We're not building a social platform. We're not building a music platform. We are building products that serve customers to make their lives easier. And if they're willing to pay for that, then I think that's a pretty good signal that we should be focused on that more product.
What sort of timeline are you looking for really to get to profitability? Because obviously there's that balance between growing, getting revenue traction, go to profitability. I know the CFO, they see these high burn rates with most ventures, and they can certainly appreciate your leadership there, Kal.
Yeah, I would love to understand how you think about that as well. But from our perspective, it's certainly not in the first few years, but we think that within a, call it 5 to 7 year period, where would we be from a financial perspective? And I think if we see the right trend moving towards profitability or being cash flow positive, obviously that's a good signal for us. So if we're hyper scaling a specific product and we think that it needs more funding, we will do that. But given our mandate, given our focus, I think it's probably call it 5 to 7 year period.
Yeah, that makes complete sense from what we've seen. Typically, one of the challenges is how long does the operating group, can it last 5 to 7 years, right? Usually these groups get funded like 3 years, and so you have to have enough momentum. Some of those early wins, I think, become pretty critical.
the studio itself, you mean, Marcus? Like
The studio itself, exactly, yeah.
like the studio doesn't last long enough for the ventures to materialize and generate enough scale to take the wins.
Yeah, well, that's one of the beauties of our model. While we are a corporate venture studio, That's what we started the conversation with. There isn't a lot of decisioning or mandates coming from our corporate investor. But the consistency that we've had, the ability to stay focused on the mandate and serving small to medium sized customers. Um, yeah, it's given us, I think it's a competitive advantage for us is the way I think about it. I'm not out there raising capital. We know what we have in terms of the capital envelope to work with, but we have the assurance and we have the confidence in our investor that we're focused on the right opportunities. And I think given what we are aiming to do in 2025, it only builds more into that confidence. Like going back to the point that you raised earlier, Marcus, if we don't see something working, we won't fund it fully at the beginning of a venture, right? We will fund it along the way. If it's not working, it's our job to make sure that we make that decision and we have that fiduciary responsibility that if it's not really meeting up to the standard of what we believe, then we're going to kill that venture.
And that's the hardest thing that, Ben and I have seen over the last 10 years, doing this. It's been the ability to basically have that Orgeller moment, the ability to actually, recycle the talent and capital and actually get the learnings and repopulate those learnings to the new venture building activities, opposed to just holding on to dear life with some of these companies.
Well, I think this is, and I would love your opinion on this. Like one of the things that I think about is how do we create a learning environment within 1848 Ventures so we learn from success, but we learn just as much from failure, right? And if we can take those learnings, apply them into the work that we do moving forward, so we're not making the same maybe mistakes or kind of going through the same pitfalls, I think that's a win. Like part of this journey for all of us in venture and venture studios is that you are going to fail. It is naturally risky, right? So how do you capture that risk? How do you understand that risk? How do you learn from that risk and then apply it to the work that you do so it's not something that happens over and over again? You're learning new things along the way. So for us, like creating that learning environment, celebrating failure as much as we celebrate success is an important part of the type of environment and culture that we're building within 1848 Ventures.
Yeah, it's such a tough one. The celebrate failure in particular for me, I think really part of this comes down to it all comes down to the people you have inside the studio. So in your case, inside of 1848, I've seen folks come into studios, corporate venture studios. They see it as a pathway to level up within the organization. Shiny toy, I'll do my 2 years here. I can't fail because that would be terrible because I'm not going to go get the director or the senior director or the VP job. And then I'll go back to the core having built some, successful business. And those folks can't do failure, right? Because they can't, if they fail, then it just looks like they failed. They shit the bed and that won't work. But if it's people who believe in the studio model and they've kind of like burned the ships, I'm not doing this to level up within the org and then go back into the org, well, then failure is just part of building companies. And as long as it's not a competence issue, we learned and it didn't work. And then we can celebrate that. And that person might even level up inside of a studio as a result of that failure, as opposed to, trying to go back into the mothership. So to me, it's about the team. Because celebrating failure I think, is borderline impossible.
Yeah, I was going to say this is about the team, Ben, but I think it also begs the differ of looking at what is the organizational structure again, right? The fact that the entity is separate and who you're employed by, I think, really matters because you don't have to burn the boats or or knock down the bridge if your only employment is the actual studio. There's nowhere to go.
No, that's my point. There is nowhere to go, right? So if there's nowhere to go, you're not doing this as a way of just getting attention from senior folks within the org. You're doing it to legitimately build new businesses, which by its very nature will have failure built into the model.
Yeah. And that is exactly the approach that we take. I didn't come from the insurance side of our business. I was hired in really to help build out what we are now doing at 1848 Ventures. And again, back to velocity, quality, and scalability. That is what we're focused on. But look, I've had the opportunity and I've been very fortunate to work at companies where we have celebrated failure, right? I mean, if you look at Google, how many products, for all the products that are successful in market, there's probably double the amount that are not successful, right? Even at Spotify, when I was there are, products that have been successful and things that we shut down. I remember that, I think it was probably my first year there. we had created like an app store. If you go to Spotify, I'm pretty sure you're not going to see an app store, right? So like I think along the way, those learnings helped with what I think the team would say is like, it wasn't like this hyper growth. It was a set of linear growths that got them to where they are today. But that all comes from both having successes along the way, but also having failures. And I think historically, I think both of you are right. There may have been this concern that failure is not an option. I think failure is part of the journey. It has to be.
100%.
But you have to learn quickly and you have to make decisions and understand how to then, incorporate those learnings back into the work that you do. So you're not making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, well, I think that's the key, Cal, because if you think about this in a corporate studio context, or think about it in a corporate context where projects run for a long time, the budgets tend to be high, nobody wants to admit failure, so they just, tens of millions of dollars of projects sort of swept under a rug. Here, failure is okay if it's fast, it doesn't cost a lot of money. If we're just being very clear about it, right? If we can learn quickly and say, well, that didn't work, but it didn't cost us 3/4 of our budget. So thank goodness that was a good decision. And we've learned a bunch from that and we can not repeat those mistakes. To me, then you do celebrate that as a key part of the venture studio model.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's exactly right. And I think your point on budget's a good one. I don't think we've had to experience this in the time that I've been here, but look, it's easy to overspend, right? And like you continue to invest in something that doesn't seem to be working, but in order to try to make it work, you pour more money into it. We haven't done that, luckily, and we're not going to do that moving forward. So the goal is how do you back to some of the questions, Marcus, you were asking earlier. How do we understand the success of a venture at a certain stage? Is it truly working? Does it meet our kind of scorecard metrics? Does it pass our, in-market sniff test? Are we seeing customer validation? And are we growing the customer base, right? So it's sometimes easy to get that. Easy is maybe not the right word, but sometimes it's, in any which way possible to get that first set of customers. But can you grow a pipeline? Can you cultivate a pipeline? Can you ensure that there's repeat business? And those are things we're now focused on. And I think we're seeing that not only is the team really adopting the way of working that we've now established, but we're seeing that the products and the companies that we're building have that ability to create that repeat opportunity or that pipeline opportunity that I mentioned. So that's where we spend a lot of time these days.
You're in such an interesting spot with respect to this to studio operations. And tell us a bit more about what you're thinking about doubling down into the capabilities or new capabilities beyond AI. Obviously, that's the easy one, applying AI to be able to build companies and do rapid prototyping faster. But I think that, at the stage that you're at, being at it for a few years, and now you have this new lens coming into at this point. I think it's a very unique opportunity to really take some bigger swings.
Yeah, I think in addition to what I've already mentioned around like having some of these operators join earlier in that process, so the go to market industry folks. Look, I think having some horizontal go to market individuals who can help us think through even before hiring like a leader for a venture, general go to market kind of like a playbook of how we should be thinking about go to market, I think is very important. Back to product and engineering. I think having more engineers earlier in the process, having data scientists earlier in the process is a big focus for us. So I think we've more than doubled our engineering team in the last 7 months that I've been here in the studio model, or the innovation engine. And I think that would be a place where we continue to focus, right? So go to market is a big one for us, and product and engineering, especially in those build phases. We want to do more of that earlier in the engine.
Makes sense.
What are some of the changes you've made with the operations in the first 7 months?
Yeah, I think establish one of the big things that I've focused on is reestablishing our strategy. So it's easy to say refocus on small to medium sized businesses. That's great. But what does that really mean? What is the profile of an SMB owner? Where do we believe are the right industries that we should be focused on within small to medium sized businesses? Again, what are some of the horizontal opportunities that are presenting themselves given this ability to bring technology into the fold, and knowing how the market is maturing, right? So establishing a strategy that everybody can align around has been a big focus for us. So we've done that. We've established a new operating rhythm, as I like to call it. So the way we work inside 1848 Ventures, obviously everything we talked about from a principal standpoint, but again, idea generation, scorecarding, getting products and services into market, more customer conversations. So those have been a big focus for us. I think just establishing more communication with the entire team, right? So between the venture leaders who run each of our startups and our organizational leadership, having that group spend more time together, I think is really important for us. So we've done quite a bit of that over the course of the last 7 months as well.
What about talent moving within ventures? Are you supporting that just from different variety of experiences? I think that's a hot topic these days, kind of specifically with corporate venture studios.
Yeah, it's a good question. We do. Yeah, we've seen individuals kind of bounce from a couple of different ventures that we're working on today. We've also taken some of our resourcing from the innovation engine itself and applied it to the venture teams, not in terms of the leadership, but across some of the other functions that operate when a venture is out there in market. Um, I call it cross pollination is the simple way of pulling it. Look, I think the more we can cross pollinate, the more institutional knowledge we can share across the work we do in the engine or across the ventures, it's the better it is for us as a studio, the better it is for the employee as well, right? So I'm a big believer in upskilling. I'm a big believer in like sharing experiences and making sure that every single person that works at 1848 Ventures has an amazing experience when they're here. So when you get to do these different things and start to cross pollinate, I think it just creates a very different environment. So we focus on that quite a bit.
Sounds like you're really unlocking a special talent class within this group.
That's a great way of saying it. Yeah.
That was so nice, Marcus. That was such a nice way to
You
say
know, I have my moments.
You do. You 100% do. So Cal, let me ask you, sort of one final question. If you were providing advice to another company, another Westfield, not in insurance, but some other industry, and they were looking at starting a corporate venture studio, what would be sort of your one big piece of advice? They're starting from nothing. They see 1848 and they think, geez, I want one of those. We should be doing that. What's your one, top, other than stealing your whole team, which is not an option, but what would be your piece of advice that you would give that corporate?
Well, number one, look, I think back to like talent. One of the things I do believe in is that, talent will move on at some point. That is just the reality of everything that we do. So while you have a strong talented team within your organization, your number one responsibility is to upskill them. So when they end up leaving your organization at some point, which is inevitable, that they are the most marketable candidate in the job pool. Like that is what we want to provide individuals when they come to 1848 Ventures, because we think that they will contribute to our success. And if they can contribute to our success, that when they do end up moving on, we'd love them to stay forever. It's not reality, but if they do end up moving on, that they are highly marketable. So that's one area that we focus on from a talent perspective. I want to break it down to a few areas I think are important. Number one, have a very clear mandate. And everything that's changed within 1848 Ventures, the mandate has stayed consistent since the beginning of 1848 Ventures. So to me, the mandate's really important. I think that's clear. I think experimentation is also key. You're not going to get it right the first time around. So have the flexibility, have the ability to experiment. Again, learn from those experiments quickly and adapt. I think that's an important part of the journey that we're on. And always be shipping, right? I mean, it's easy to say, but like at these early stages, I don't care if you're building your own individual startup or you're within a venture studio model, you have to ship product. The more you ship, the more you will learn, the better you will build companies. So that's an important part of the journey as well. So I would say those are important. Last thing I would also say is that AI is fundamentally reshaping how businesses are built, right? So within the venture studio model, we are in a prime position to capitalize on that. So don't be afraid of what's coming. Embrace it. It may be messy. It may be challenging. It may be a whole new unknown, but embrace the change. And as the more you embrace it, I think the better the outcomes will be for you and your venture studio.
Kel, do you have any asks for the Beyond the Core community or how people can get in touch with you?
Kal Amin at 1848ventures.com. Feel free to reach out. I think the ask is, look, as we expand our kind of, as I said earlier, expand our view on the market opportunity, if you have ideas, thoughts that you're willing to share with us, we'd love to hear from you, right? Um, One of the things you had asked earlier is like kind of this journey over the last 7 months. Ben knows this well. When I first started, we went on a listening tour to speak to VCs and venture studios. Caught up with Ben, which was very insightful. Um, but the more we can learn and the more we can share with each other, the better it will be for everybody. I'd love to establish a venture studio community that we're all part of, be it virtually across Slack or on calls like this, or even getting individuals together, call it once a year so we can share best practices. We can learn from each other. I think that would be really welcoming to the 1848 team. And hopefully there are others within the community that like yourselves that are doing this podcast. So thank you again for that. But like others that we can bring in so we can really build what venture studio is really about. It's so varying across the industry. How do we find commonality that we can all kind of tie into?
Totally agree. We can probably help a little bit with that, I would think. But and it is varied because there's so many flavors of venture studios. There's so many different ways of doing it. I think your point about the strategy with companies, what's the mandate and the strategy? Westfield and 1848 has one approach to that. Somebody else might have a different approach. So, Kal, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. This was a great conversation, and we wish you the best of luck with 1848 Ventures.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks, Cal.
Excited to be here. Thank you.